So let's move on to the next lady. On the article says that the third lady is called Mary. According to the article, it says this is also Mary's experience. She is 53 and has been celibate for 5 years. In quote, a lot of us feel that we are not expressing ourselves sensually. It's important to use the word sensual, not sexual. For women like me, it is not about the act of sex. It is about having the intimacy of emotions as well as the physical experiences. Like Jane, Mary has little interest in casual flings, but misses physical intimacy. She has even considered using escorts. Again, she has even considered using escorts. It is a far cry from the close relationship she desires, but she would feel more comfortable with the idea of a no strings sexual encounter if she knew exactly what it entailed. In quote, I am not really sure that safe, secure sex workers and the services exist, but in any way, it will be preferable to one night stands. At least, it will be safe, secure, rather, it will be a safe, secure transaction for which you and the man involved knew exactly what you were signing up for, with no risks of violence, sexually transmitted diseases, or emotional hurt and confusion. Mary also refuses to use dating apps due to the number of married men seeking affairs and the difficulties she has in building connections. In quote, she says, the Me Too movement was extremely important, but at the same time, it created polarizations in society, she says. She believes that as men attempt to relearn the best ways to approach women so that they feel safe and comfortable, it can discourage some from making a connection at all. In quote, it's like nobody knows how to date anymore, and the fast paced culture of apps means nobody has the patience to get to know someone. Close quote. She says the men she encounters are almost always looking for someone younger than themselves. Let me just stop. Powerful, powerful, powerful acknowledgement. You know, I once heard someone say that the stories we come across in life usually come in two sides of a ledger. On one side, you have examples, people whose life you should emulate. And on the other side, you have what we call warnings, people whose lives you should avoid emulating, and instead you should learn from their mistakes. These three women so far have provided a very, very, very useful insight as to what is potentially and very plausibly awaiting most modern women. They put their careers first. They delay the process of finding a life partner, getting married. They believe they will always be desired. Most of them were not raised or trained to be wives. Most lack the traditional values required to keep a man. Many, unfortunately, do not understand how men think and how important it is to stay youthful as much as you can by looking after your weight, by looking after your fitness level, and by staying very feminine. And what you find from Mary's experience is unfortunately something that I could call a foreshadowing of things that are to come for most modern women. Let me go back to Mary's statements, and I'll pick out about 3 or 4 different sections to emphasize on. She states, and this accords with something I said in the previous session when I talked about Jane. She says that Mary also refuses to use dating apps. A woman who is 53 should not be using a dating app. The idea is just preposterous. And like I said in the earlier session, we've democratized the sexual marketplace to the point where it's blood sport. It's kill or be killed. It's the survival of the fittest. No price is too low. Anything is expected. The behaviors the men, the idea that the man doesn't even bring flowers, and you don't get to see flowers, and you don't get a first date, but he expects sex just by swiping left, says it's all. Now I know obviously there aren't not all sites do the same thing. The swipe left and swipe right from online mobile apps are quite different from online dating apps, but they've all almost in many ways migrated towards the microwave, very fast-paced approach to dating. But women such as Jane and Mary, both, you could say in their 50s, Jane is 49 going on 50, Mary is 53. The idea that she would be on a dating app such as Tinder or Bumble or any other similar type of app is preposterous. She should be using a matchmaker. And the reason is simply most men in that age group, 50s and above, who are on such sites have the resource. And so very young women from 20 and above are desperate to be with such men. They have a plethora of options, sexual options, and it's very unlikely that a man who really is looking for a companion in the 50 years and above age group would go to a dating app. It's just very, very unlikely. And it's also very unlikely that he would choose a woman of that age group. I mean, no disrespect. But it's also very, very likely that if he were on such an app, and if he were to come across a woman like Jane, 49, or Mary, 53, or even Caitlin, who we talked about in the first segment of this session, who is 39. If a man who is, say, 55 was to come across any of the 3 women, he would take on both plates all of those women if they offered themselves to him. And he would do so without regret and without any remorse. Why? That is what the feminist movement wanted. You wanted the democratization of the sexual marketplace. Women were allowed to do whatever they wanted. Therefore, men are allowed to be whores like they've always been. And now they expect women to be the same. As a matter of fact, it's a race to the bottom. Now, let me go ahead with Mary's section. Mary says that, and this is a powerful statement, she says, the Me Too movement was an extremely important one. But at the same time, it's created a polarization in society, she says, and she believes that men, as men are learning, attempting to relearn the best way to approach women, they feel in many ways it discourages men from making any connection. And that's the reason why a lot of these dating apps are really sexualized. Because in principle, what that means is the man knows he has some protection. If you're there on the dating app and you swipe, as a matter of fact, Bumble is a site created, but the initiation of conversations begins when the woman says it begins. Women who are middle-aged should understand this statement. Women control when the intimacy, when the conversation and when sex begins. Women also control when a baby is born or conceived. However, women must understand that relationships and meaningful relationships, and when I use the word meaningful, the best way um, to express this is through the act of marriage, where someone commits themselves to you, or through the act of civil partnership. Relationships are controlled by men. So, if you are on a dating app, it's implicitly assumed that if you are a woman, you've given your consent to the possibility that if there is connection, that sex will happen. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee from the man that even if a connection is made, that there will be a meaningful relationship that is birthed from the interaction. So, ladies, understand very carefully that you don't get to choose when the meaningful relationship begins, because you're the one who gets chosen. You choose the man you get intimate with, the man you have sex with, and the man you reproduce for. But it is the man who chooses who his spouse, who his wife will be. There is no changing to that, especially for men within a certain socio-economic level. What struck me from Mary's statement was that she said that it's really funny because it's I never thought that we would get to this, or rather, I knew we would get to this. I never thought it would be this quickly. But Mary says that she has very little interest in casual flings. I'm sorry, for women who are in that age group, unfortunately, you have no leverage, which is the reason, particularly, why we encourage women to start the process very early, to get married as early as possible. Most importantly, to learn how to be good wives so that they can stay married. And most importantly, marriage is a way of civilizing men. At 50, a woman should not be out dating. I know, except for situations and circumstances where, for example, there's been a bereavement and she's lost her husband, or there's been a divorce. But women at 50 should not be out dating. And the reason is because even if you've been married, let's say you were married for 20 years and sadly you lost your husband, at 50, you were married for 20 years, means you were married from about 30. But before your husband, maybe you dated one or two other people, maybe long-term relationships. And so what that might mean is that although you're 50 years old, relationally, you're still about 25. And that means you're not necessarily cut out for the unemotional landscape that we find ourselves in today. And it will end very badly for most women in that age group, which is the reason we stress, which is why I strongly disavow the feminist movement. Because you look at society today, women are being encouraged to put their careers first and to put starting a family second, or even never. The consequence of that is women get to about 35 and they decide, well, I've achieved as much as I can for now. I want to start a family. And there are no eligible men. As a matter of fact, sometimes there are eligible men. They choose these women not as wives, but as partners, which is something I should address that, because it's one of the greatest deceptions I've ever seen in the 21st century. Women are called partners, and intelligently, such a word, in my opinion, creates a false illusion that is comparable to being a wife. As a matter of fact, you have women who are happy to live with a man for 15 years, have kids for the man for 15 years and not have the title, bestow upon the man the greatest honor, which is to have his kids, to serve him for 15 years, and not demand that he commit to her through the act of marriage. Usually, women who are court partners, and I know this is not for this session, but let me just say this. Women who are court partners, or women who are partners, who are looking for partners, are usually women who cannot find men who will call them wives. It's like a second class position for women who cannot get men to call them wives. And so for people like Mary, she says she's not interested in casual flings, but she does miss the physical intimacy. Now, what is profound is she says, I have even considered using escorts. Now, she's going to have to use escorts. Who could have thought? Remember, we started today's session, or the session earlier, talking about when men would go to prostitutes for their sexual desires, because back in the day, the way you actually got sex was through your wife. If you wanted to have sex, you got married. And for the few men who were married, or who did not want to be married, or who were not married but still wanted sex, they had to go to brothels and find escorts. But it was socially seen as the price that one had to pay. Today, what we have, and this is going to be something that would be a part of the modern women's possibilities in the future, is that most women will start to use male escorts. People who are discreet, people who are professional, people who are tested sexually, so there are no issues in relation to sexually transmitted diseases, but people who treat this as a business. The man comes around and he meets your needs. You want a massage, he gives you one. You want him to play with you, he plays with you. You want him to pole dance, he does that for you. You want him to cook, he will do that for you as well. In other words, you pay for the service you want. Now that sounds exciting when you're 25 or 27. That is nothing. There's nothing exciting about that for a woman who is 53. Just something wrong. Now, like I said before, for women who have been divorced, who are bereaved, for women who have very unique circumstances, that might be the only option. However, in today's society, we can see women following the same footsteps as Caitlin, Mary, and Jane. And the escort services for men is about to blow up because the sexual marketplace, which is now at the lowest level it's ever been, will get worse. It will get worse. And therefore, women would have to go out and look for professional men who can be discreet. Because the problem with a lot of these social media sites is that it's so easy for someone to see your profile, especially if you're someone of notoriety. It's possible for people to see your profile and use that against you. And so escorts will be the norm for women of a certain age group because it can be done professionally. You will have to pay a lot of money. And guess what? It will be strictly business. Now, that is not the life that a middle-aged woman should be living. Middle-aged man, maybe, it's a double standard. It is a man's world. It is a double standard. But a woman at that age, I don't think so. But maybe I'm old-fashioned, and I just feel, 40, 50, you should be, under the protection, the love of your husband or your partner or your significant other, your someone who's committed to you. Because if you're using escorts, who looks after you when you become ill? Who looks after you when you fall down? Who takes you to the hospital when you get your insulin shot? Who takes you to the hospital when you need to see your GP? Who recognizes when you have a high blood rate? You know, we're not designed as human beings to be alone. And women, especially of the group, are social beings. Women need relationships much more than men need relationships. And, yes, escorts are perhaps a useful way of meeting a sexual need or an intimacy need, but it's certainly not how one is supposed to live. The Mary is 53, she'll be 63 in 10 years. What happens when she becomes 63? Who takes her, who's there, running her a bath, making sure she doesn't fall when she's in the shower? And if she does fall, who's there to come and help her? Women such as Mary should be the ones doing what I am doing now. Speaking to the younger girls and saying, the message you've heard for the last 30, 40, 50 years is wrong. The message is wrong. And if you do not want to be like I am in the future, you must make some very, very quick, urgent decisions. You must change course. You must take men seriously. You must decide that you need men, that men are not simply a nice to have for sex and for provision, but that men are necessary for a fulfilled life. Women have to start doing what I am doing. Sharing their experiences, not through an online blog, but coming out and saying, listen, these were the mistakes I made. I was young, I was dumb. I believed the whole gospel. I drank the Kool-Aid, and here I am. Now, let me move on and bring this to a close, because it's somewhat quite painful and sad to see. The article goes on to say, according to Silva Neves, a sex and relationship psychotherapist with the UK Council of Psychotherapy, it is not uncommon for women to struggle to find a partner they find physically attractive, especially as they get older. In quote, society places a high importance on women's beauty, he says. In quote, we absorb and internalize this misogyny on every level. And even women are more likely to criticize another woman's body than a man's. You often see women put in more effort into their appearance as they age because that's what they have been taught is important. But a lot of women complain that they struggle to be attracted to men because they have let themselves go. I'll say two things. Number one, I don't understand where misogyny comes in from. Silver, whoever you are, is greatly mistaken. Society does not place high importance on women's beauty. It's not just society, it's biological. Men are attracted to beauty. We are visual first. And let me say this for those of you who may be listening. There is a foolish belief shared amongst women that the man will love you for who you are. Let me say this, and let me say this very strongly. We will, but we will miss you as well. We will love you for who you are, but we will miss you. It will not be our responsibility to love you. if you do not take care of yourself. That will be someone else's problem. I've seen so many women say, if a man really loves you, he'll love you for who you are. We're visual. There's only a very small minority of men who will do that, especially if you want your man to be faithful. If you do not want to share your man, you're going to have to work. As a matter of fact, your competition today for women is so strong that I feel very sorry for women. You only have to go and look at several sites, Instagram, Facebook, OnlyFans, YouTube, and all the various dating apps and dating sites and porn sites that are available to see what women are offering to men. Like I said, it's a race to the bottom. So men, from a visual perspective, we do not have to settle. If you're married, you're going to work much harder than you did before you got married, if you want to keep your family together. And the reason is not because the man is looking to go astray. No, the reason is simply because there are other women out there who can see what you have, who are willing to play dirty to get your man. And every day you must stand guard at the gate of your family's territory, which is your man. You have to become protective of your family, your man, and what belongs to you. For those women who believe that they are too important and that no man is worth fighting for, I can only say to you, good luck. Now, let me go back to the article because I think there are a few other things that are worth considering. This is powerful stuff. This is powerful stuff. I really wish women could read this with an open mind, this article from The Guardian, with an open mind and learn the lessons. Now, the article goes on to say, while many men still prioritize beauty, and let me make a correction. No, we still prioritize beauty. That's all we prioritize. The man has to see you first before he gets to know you. Conversations do not precede appearance. Andre Agassi, in one of his books, Open, he said something that stuck with me a long, long time ago. When he played in the Grand Slams, he said, and he narrates this in the book, he said, he came up with a slogan, image is everything. And that stuck with me. And that applies to most men. Image is everything. We see first, that arouses an interest. That interest leads to a conversation. That conversation opens up a door to understanding your temperament, your character, and all the other non-sexual values you have. But until we look at you, and there is a connection, there is no intimacy. There is no connection. So, going back to the article where it says, while many men still prioritize beauty, and yes, we will continue to do that, Neves says, women's other successes, such as education, wealth, or a good career, may be deemed threatening. No, it's not threatening. It's just that certain men of certain socio-economic class, we don't care about your success. We have ours. We don't care about your education. We don't care about your wealth. We don't intend to use your wealth. We don't care about your family's wealth. It makes no difference to us. We have ours. Our role as men, primarily, is provision and protection. We are not looking to delegate those two responsibilities. So the idea that men are threatened by successful, educated, wealthy, career-driven women is just false. The reason most men do not want that is because women who tend to focus on what I call your EIV, which is your economic intrinsic value, they tend to neglect their sexual marketplace value, or they tend to have a very low sexual marketplace value, and also they tend to have almost no reproductive value. And, forgive me for saying this, the non-sexual marketplace value, which is NSMV, is usually very low. So in many ways, many women compensate for doing poorly in the most important areas by relying on education, on career, on achievement, on wealth. All of which men have been saying for generations, we don't care about it. It's not that we find that threatening, we just do not care. Now, the article concludes with someone else who is called Elaine and someone who's called Yvonne. Elaine is 37, Yvonne is 28. But let me conclude with these two other ladies. It says Elaine, who's 37, has been celibate for 5 years, feels a successful career has played a role in her dating difficulties. She's correct. It's not your successful career, it's the attitude that comes with your career. You've neglected what you should have been focusing on. In other words, the feminist movement taught women to be like men. Men focus on careers to provide resources. Now, the article goes on, in quotes, Elaine says, men don't like the fact that I don't cook or clean, even though I pay for someone to do both jobs. That is true. You have no traditional values. You're not feminine. And unfortunately, especially for men, around that age group, they're looking to start their families. They're looking for a woman who can come in and be a mother. You're not considered because in many ways, you were not trained to be a wife. And therefore, men do not consider you wife material. It's really that simple. Now, the article goes on to say, the stereotype of male hunter-gatherer remains quite prevalent. And at all times, I think they feel they don't have a role. Like other women, Elaine is seeking an intellectual equal and is not interested in finding someone who would take care of her. Elaine, who is 37, I have news for you. At 37, you've sadly gone past high-risk pregnancy. You better start thinking with a sense of urgency. Otherwise, you will end up like Mary and Jane. Probably and very likely, you're going to die alone. Now, this is a painful thing to say, but say it I must. She says, I don't necessarily need to be with a man who has a degree, but I want to meet someone who is intellectually curious with the same values, she says. In quote, I think men can be intimidated by education and career success. In online dating especially, it always seems to come down to appearance only. I even know people who get professional pictures done as they know looks will be the first thing men see. As a black woman, this can be especially hard, as even black men seem to prioritize light-skinned women. Well, let me put aside all of the racial issues referenced there because it's such a sensitive thing, and let me not go in there. But let me say this: men are not intimidated. Men of a certain socioeconomic class, we're not intimidated by education and career success. But unfortunately, the higher up a woman goes in pursuing her profession and education, the lower she performs in her sexual marketplace value and in her reproductive value. So I would simply say a lot has to change with women. Now, the final woman is Yvonne, who is 28. She recognizes the same traditional values in men her age. Despite numerous attempts at dating on and offline, she has never had a relationship and doesn't engage in casual sex. In quote, I don't necessarily need to be with a man who has a degree, but I want to meet someone who is intellectually curious with the same values. I think men are intimidated by education and career success. In online dating especially, it always seems to come down to appearance only. Yvonne is determined to stay positive. She has an active social life, enjoys a wide range of activities, and subscribes to some websites. A weekly newsletter that celebrates the joys of single life and supports people through more challenging aspects. This is quite sad. It says in quotes, there are a lot of women, this is Yvonne saying, there are a lot of women who are joining communities of other single women and sharing their experiences. She says, it's certainly a much healthier approach than some of the toxic, women-hating platforms that some men inhabit. You see, this is the problem we face in today's society. Yvonne is 28, and at 28, it says she's never had a relationship. Not one. You see, the problem is not without, the problem is within. Here are 3 recommendations, 4 recommendations for all the women we've discussed so far. Number 1, I'll start with Yvonne and I'll work backwards. Yvonne needs to very quickly hire a psychiatrist or a therapist. At 28, if you have not dated, then it means one of 2 things. You're still either a virgin or very likely you've just had very short-term relationships, situationships with men. And so you have no relationship muscles. You don't know what it means. You don't know what it feels like to actually habitate, collaborate, work with a man. And therefore, you're very unappealing to most men. Now, she's 2 years away from 30, and very quickly she'll be in 32, and she is a perfect candidate for what men on online dating sites look for. Women who have no skills, women who have no qualities of being long-term partners, and therefore men just use these women and dump them over and over again. First recommendation, she needs a therapist. She needs a psychiatrist. Not because there is anything wrong with her, but at 28, there's a possibility that she has issues that she's carried and nursed for a long time, and she needs to speak to someone. So someone can clinically diagnose whether the traumas from her past that are holding her back from finding or committing to a man. Number 2, for all women, you need to take very, very, very serious steps to address your image, because every one of you seems to be complaining about image. And my experience is that the pretty girls and the pretty women don't complain. The women who complain about image are usually those who do not take care of themselves or those who are not very attractive. And so you need to find a personal trainer who can provide you with a very detailed plan, dietary plan and workout plan to accentuate and bring out the best qualities, your physical attributes, so that you're appealing to men. Number 3, my recommendation is, if it is this difficult for you or to find people on social media dating sites, then my recommendation is you need to stop using such sites, and you need to start working with dating agencies, matchmakers, and dating professionals, people who can be very specific, who can meet you, not something you do online, people who will meet you first, understand who you are, understand what you want, and then they can go out and find the right type of caliber of men that will be fitting to who you are. Now, in addition to using such sites, you must get active. Ladies, one of the first rules for success in dating is to go where the fish are. You've been told for too long that women, you're special, and that women, you're queens. I hate to break this to you. In the marketplace, you're not special. You are special to your family, your friends, to your God, if you believe in one. But in the marketplace, you're just a woman. You're going to learn how to compete if you want to be in a relationship. And that starts with you finding the environment where men are. This might require moving, relocating, traveling regularly, joining associations, tennis club, and think about the seasons we have in the UK. There are several seasons and several activities for all the respective seasons. During the summer, something that is done outdoors is great, tennis. In the winter, squash. Join a gym. Join a dance club. As a matter of fact, my best recommendation to all of you 4 women or 5 women is you need to learn how to dance. Salsa, kizomba, bachata, merengue. You need to learn how to dance. You need to be engaged in several types of activities where you can meet people. There are good men out there, especially for Yvonne, who is 28. There is still hope. But you must, in order to achieve something you do not have, you must be willing to do something that you've never done. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. Now, let me conclude by saying I provided in the first lecture, in the first part, I provided what I call the age categorization. And I also, alongside the age categorization, I also provided the categories of value. I think it's important you go back and you just re-listen to that section so you can understand how we appraise the price we're willing to pay for the value we believe you have. Before a transaction takes place, a relational transaction takes place, a man has to feel that he is getting more in value than he is paying in price. That is very, very important. A man has to feel that he is getting more in value than he is paying in price. So we start out by ranking what we believe your value is. We estimate your value. I provided 4 categories, but in addition to that, I provided 4 categories for different age groups. If you can, go back to the first section and listen to each of those categories, because I think it would give you the understanding you need to make the necessary changes in your life. And I really do hope you will.